How are you?
Good, doing well, Sean. Thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for joining me. Just want to say hello to all our viewers. My name is Sean Sheppard. Welcome to Community Quarantine. And today's guest is retired San Diego Police Department Chief Shelley Zimmerman. Chief, thank you for joining me today.
I really appreciate you asking me to join you today. How are you doing, Sean?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. First things first, talk to me about COVID-19. How's the family? How are you doing? How are your friends doing?
I appreciate you asking. Well, certainly for myself and my family, and I think everyone, it's certainly been different, a challenge for someone like myself who likes to go 724 and warp speed. It's, trying to slow things down. But, you talk about the family. My family is really scattered across the country. I have my older brother's a doctor in New York, and his
Oh, that's
hospital.
right. That's right.
Yeah, and his hospital has treated and is treating several of patients that have COVID-19. My older sister is in North Carolina, and my younger brother is in Cleveland. My mom's in Cleveland. Everyone, is with their own self, and what they're dealing with is, hanging in there. I will tell you, I'm so proud of my family, and I want to talk about and brag a little bit about my 90-year-old mother. She lives in an apartment alone in Cleveland. She's very self-sufficient, and we taught our mom how to Zoom. And so every, at least now we're doing about once a week, we're having our family Zooms meetings, and that's been pretty great to catch up with everyone.
God bless her. 90 years old, and you still have her with you. That's fantastic. I'm glad she's doing well. Glad you have a chance to keep in contact with her regularly, virtually.
Yes, thank you.
So you've had a 35-year career in law enforcement. Before we get to that, I want to start at the beginning. You're from Cleveland, Ohio. I'm just connecting the dots because Clark Kellogg's from Cleveland as well. Seems like you two have been following each other throughout life. Talk to me about growing up in Cleveland and why Ohio is such a special place for you as it is for Clark.
Yeah, it's interesting. You talk about that the journey through life is really a straight line. There'll be many twists and turns, and I believe you should embrace them because they can lead you to places you never imagined were possible. And you talk about how does a kid who grew up in Cleveland, I actually grew up in Beechwood, Ohio, which is a suburb on the east side of Cleveland, and a proud graduate of The Ohio State. As a matter of fact, I watched Clark Kellogg play basketball when I was at Ohio State. So I graduated in 1981, and I believe he was there, 3 of those years that I was there?
Might have been.
Yeah. And so
He
you're
was.
right.
He
Clark's
was.
from Cleveland.
Yep.
And, I tell you, it's about community, and it's, talk about a working class city. Cleveland, Ohio really is. And they've had to overcome so much as a city. And, I love so many things about Cleveland. I do not love the weather.
Right.
And so that played a big part of it. But, I'm still a huge Browns fan, Cleveland Indians fan, a Cavaliers fan, obviously a huge Buckeye fan. And that brings us all together. I'm sure we'll probably talk about how sports brings us all together. But it was great growing up in Cleveland, great family values. My family, of course, instilled, I believe, great ethics and values into me and into all both my brothers and my sister. And that's what it's all about serving others.
Well, you can't have a 35-year career in law enforcement without leading a disciplined lifestyle. Which one of your parents do you think instilled that discipline, and was it both of them?
It was definitely both of them, without a doubt. My dad, he's been gone, gosh, I think more than 20 years now. And, he had a tough life. I mean, he was a World War II veteran. He went off to distant lands. He enlisted in the Army, infantry, was a machine gunner, saw real action, came back, and thank God he came back, and married our mom. and 4 great kids. And, you know, those values were of hard work, and nobody gives you anything. You know, you have to work hard for it. And he became a trial attorney in Cleveland. And I know that his, you know, what his dream was to have one of his 4 kids follow in his footsteps. And we all moved away, but thank God for my younger brother, Rob, who's still in Cleveland. He became a trial attorney. And he is also a city councilman for Shaker Heights, Ohio, which is a different suburb on the east side of Cleveland.
Well, I'm sure all 4 of your parents' kids have made them proud. Talk to me about your time in high school. Were you an athlete? Were you a bookworm?
You know, I loved high school. I loved learning. I was an athlete. I was a basketball player. It was actually my senior year. I was captain of the basketball team. I ran track. I was a lifeguard all through high school, and then also throughout my college days. And so sports was always a big part of growing up in Cleveland. And, you know, I remember, you know, certainly the Indians were not very good when I lived in Cleveland. They got good later on.
Yeah, when was that? When was that? When they were losing to the Yankees?
They lost to pretty much everyone, but we used to say that the Indians were like a farm club of the Yankees back in the 70s. But yeah, but you know, they did great. They got close so many times, but yeah, that 7th game loss, a couple of them are still a little tough for me. But, you know, with the Browns, and of course I could always talk to you about, you know, the plays of the Red Right 88, you know, that we lost that game. They should have had Don Cockroft kick the field goal. We lost to Oakland. And the name of the play was Red Right 88. And the drive, the fumble. And you go to the Indians and you have the pitch or the Cavs, the shot. But, of course, LeBron came back and promised delivered.
He did.
And, you know, I was a little upset when he left the first time. Okay, maybe a lot upset. But then when he came back and he delivered on that national championship for Cleveland, the first time a sports team in 50 years. I mean, it was amazing. I had on the 7th game, I had several friends over at my house here in San Diego, and we were on pins and needles, you know, counting down those last few seconds as all Cleveland fans, wherever you were watching the game, and that was something special. And so sports has been a part of my life since day one. Yes.
It was. I remember being in your office and you showed me that insane picture of the Cleveland fans celebrating the Cavs championship, and people had climbed up buildings. I mean, I'd never seen a picture like that. I was impressed.
Yeah, my younger brother Rob, you know, who's still in Cleveland, he told me a story that he got up like 3 hours before the parade, and he had actually got up longer than that or earlier than that, but had like gone to the Rapid because he didn't want to drive downtown, although his office is downtown, his law firm. But he was going to take the Rapid to go downtown, and he said like 3 hours before it was going to be like a 5-hour wait to even get on the Rapid. There were so many people, so he ended up jumping on his bicycle and riding downtown. And just really took in the day.
I'm hoping to do so with the Jets and the Knicks at some point, but I'm not holding my breath at this point.
Yeah, I get it. You know, I'll tell you, you go back to sports. I was so looking forward to this year for the home and home Padres Indians. But, yeah, but, you know, I don't think it's going to happen because that would have been in June, and don't think it's going to happen, obviously.
Well, keep our fingers crossed. They might work something out later on in the year. Chief, you had mentioned being a lifeguard in high school, and I suppose that might have been a bit of foreshadowing of you keeping people safe. After high school and you went to Ohio State, did you have any inclination that you were going to get into law enforcement?
Well, you know, it's really an interesting story. As I talked about, the journey through life is, you know, rarely a straight line, and embrace your twists and turns. Sean, a football game changed my life. When I was a junior at the Ohio State, my boyfriend and I and a few other friends, we came to California to watch Ohio State in the 1980 Rose Bowl lose to USC in the closing seconds. We lost that game. We lost that national championship when Charles White scored a touchdown with, you know, in the closing seconds by 1 point. I'm almost over it. A couple more years, I'll be okay. But you know, I didn't really like LA that much. I mean, it was certainly warmer. It was one of the coldest winters that year, 1980, 1979, 1980 in Cleveland and Columbus. And you know, you arrive in California, it's a beautiful day, you know, sunshine. But it was very smoggy, you know, in the early 80s in Pasadena, in Los Angeles. And we rented a car and we came down to San Diego. And we really, I'm a product of tourism. I used to see those commercials for the San Diego Zoo in Cleveland. And I thought, you know, I'm so close, I want to go. So we rented that car. We went to the zoo in San Diego, fell in love with it, went to some of our beautiful beaches here in San Diego. And I made a decision right then and there that I had shoveled my last driveway. I returned to Ohio State. I graduated and I jumped on a plane with $200 in my pocket, one suitcase and my guitar. When I got off the plane in San Diego, I didn't know anyone. I didn't have a job. I didn't even have a place to stay. And I used to tell people, don't worry, as your police chief, I plan much better now. And I always thought that I would go to law school and I would follow in my father's footsteps. I mostly put myself through Ohio State. I knew I would have to put myself through law school out here in San Diego. And I saw that the police department was hiring. I thought, what better way to pay for law school? I'll become a police officer. And I applied and background check and all this. And I entered the academy, San Diego Police Academy in 1982. And I fell in love with day one of the academy of being a police officer.
Why? What was it about the academy that had you immediately fall in love with the notion of being a police officer?
It is a people business. And I'll give you two right now, but I could give you hundreds. But every day you have an opportunity to make a positive difference in someone's life, and usually at the worst possible moment. You know, San Diego gets on average about 1.4 million calls into their communication center every year. And we don't get good calls. Nobody calls us for good things. They call us because something bad has happened. And so when we get that opportunity to respond, we can have an opportunity to make a positive difference in someone's life at the worst moment because they had to call us. And another reason that I'll give you, but again, I could give you hundreds, is because we as police officers respond to the myriad of society's struggles, we can use every bit of knowledge we've ever learned, no matter how important or seemingly meaningless, because we're going to come across such a variety of calls.
Well, that's fascinating to me. So you got into law enforcement work to pay for law school.
Right.
And I heard you say, what better way to pay for law school? I can think of a number of better ways than becoming a cop.
And here's the thing, but I never went to law school because I fell in love with being a police officer and I just wanted to do that, 724. And it was an honor and privilege to do it for 35 years and certainly have the opportunity to retire as the chief of police was something that I'll always cherish.
And, you know, it's interesting hearing this story because it parallels mine. I went to San Diego State to become a sports psychologist. And I got a job in the athletic weight room just to clean up and stumbled across strength and conditioning. And that changed my life. I would have never wound up at Ohio State. We would have never had that connection.
Right.
You never know where your path is going to lead you. So you're in the academy. You've decided this is what you want to do. You graduate from the academy. You're a police officer. Tell me about your early days in law enforcement as you're ascending the corporate ladder to become chief.
Well, you know, I'll tell you, it's another interesting story is that after I get out of the academy, I go through my training phases and I'm finally out on my own. And I get selected to go undercover in high school, to go back to high school. And you got to keep in mind, when I was selected to do this, this was 5 years before the TV show, let alone the movies of 21 Jump Street. And again, right. So it's early in the 80s. I think it's like 1983. And, there was a lot of reports of not just drug uses, but a lot of reports of drug dealing and very dangerous drug dealing at Patrick Henry High School in San Diego. And this is going to be hard to believe now to say this. Here we are in 2020, but I talked myself into high school. And I know it's hard to believe. And, you know, I had to take classes, and in my first week of class, you know, so my assignment was not to get straight A's, but my assignment was to see if these reports of drug dealing were true. And if true, then to buy from the drug dealers. Right. And in my first week of class, I look over, and there's a student right to my right, and the student put down a book in front of the desk to block the view of the teacher, and lays down some lines, if I remember correctly, was methamphetamine or cocaine, but it was either meth or coke, and right there in class, snorts right on the desk. And I look over and I thought to myself, well, that's a clue. Should probably, you know, talk to this person. So in the end, and I was here for, you know, a couple months, posed as a junior. And in the end, I made over 100 purchases of cocaine, methamphetamine, psilocybin, LSD, PCP, marijuana, you name it, I bought it. And in the end, you know, more than 70 students who had dealt drugs and were dealing sold to me. And the interesting story about that too is there was a lot of changes made to the campus because of that. But you know, you had to go through, you know, the criminal proceedings, but you also had the expulsion hearings. And I would tell you is that I've heard from some students that thanked me, you know, and said they were really going down the wrong path. And because of that arrest, and while they were still young, is that they were able to get in rehab and they were able to turn their life around.
You're tuned into Community Quarantine. Our guest is retired San Diego Police Department Chief Shelley Zimmerman. Chief, you go through that process. It's the early 80s, and you're a female in a male-dominated profession. Talk to us about that experience as you're working your way through the ranks. Did you have good feelings? Were you optimistic about being able to ascend?
Well, you know, it's really a two-part thing, because I had really never thought about promoting. I was on the department 14 years before I even thought about it. And that's, maybe we'll get into that. But the San Diego Police Department has always been progressive. And, you know, with the philosophy of if you can do the job, you get to do the job. I realized that maybe not everybody had the same experience that I did, but you're right. Here I am, a female, and not a lot, you know, in the early 80s. And I always felt though supported. No matter what assignment that I had, I always felt supported. Again, you know, if you can do the job, you get to do the job. There was always people that was willing to help you along the way. And I'll tell you, nobody accomplishes anything by themselves. So I had lots of help along the way, lots of mentors.
So when you talk about how the San Diego Police Department has been progressive, I happen to know the history of the San Diego Police Department being very instrumental in creating the community policing environment that we have today. Spoke with Chief Nislight about that. Please take us through your recollection of community policing and the role that the San Diego Police Department had in setting the national example for community policing.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. And, you know, I think, you know, I was thrilled when Chief Nislight was promoted to chief after me. I've worked with Dave, you know, for many, many years, and he's just a great person. And it's true that, you know, we were on the forefront of so many things with you know, sometimes you call it problem-oriented policing or community policing. They all similar terms, but maybe mean a little bit different to different people. But, you know, it all boils down to this, is that we all share in the responsibility. We all help each other. We all cooperate. We all collaborate together. And I would tell you is that, you know, we held conferences on POP conferences and had, you know, law enforcement professionals around the world come to San Diego, where, you know, we shared information on best practices. We learned from others on best practices. And, you know, it was all about trying different things. And, not, we're about can. We can do this instead of saying we can't. I think too many people are too quick to say we can't do this. We've never done it this way before. Well, how do you progress if you're not willing to take a chance and try other methods to do it? And, and I give this example too. We have more than 500 volunteers on our police department. And, staggering volunteer numbers, over, 100,000 plus hours that they volunteered. And I remember when that program really started to take off, and, there were some that said, why would we have a volunteer do something? I'm like, why wouldn't we have a volunteer do something? Let's have more people come and share in the responsibility and bring our community in, because we are the community. Our community is us. We're the community, and we're all part of it. And, that's really where the philosophy is. And look, if something doesn't work, then let's try something else, but never give up.
So when you talk about volunteers, Chief, please explain what you mean by that. Can anybody off the street get some clearance and come and volunteer? In what capacity do you mean volunteer?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's several different ways. We have some that you might see driving around in the cars that we call our retired senior volunteers.
I've seen those, right?
Yeah, and they do a lot of security checks. They may go and be, their eyes and ears. They would go and help direct traffic. They would go to, the schools and make sure that the kids, around the school checks were safe, or infrastructure areas of the city that were safe, again, being more eyes and ears. And again, we have a whole division of volunteers that are just great at directing traffic also. We have also, what they do is something called Yana checks. You are not alone. And so those are, really the shut-ins that maybe, they've outlived their family members. There's no family that happens to live in San Diego. And they would go and check on them every single day and make sure that they're okay. And I will tell you, those volunteers that have done those Yana checks have saved people's lives. Wow. And we have others that work together with respond to critical calls to help with maybe if somebody had committed suicide tragically, and we need the volunteer to help the family through that process on what that's going to look like. A lot of emotional support. So we also have young cadets that our cadet program that 16-year-old to I believe 20, and they learn about police work, and our hope is that they will get that they want to continue to serve and become police officers, particularly here in San Diego. So there's all different types of volunteer opportunities. Some will work in answer phones. We have interns that help out at many of the different divisions. So all kinds of opportunity.
Can you give our viewers a bit of information on how they might start that process of volunteering if they want to?
Yeah, definitely. I would suggest you go to the San Diego Police Department website, and it lists everything on all the different volunteer opportunities and the steps that you need to take. So, and we're always looking for more volunteers.
Well, thanks for sharing that information, Chief. So you're in the department. You said you didn't think about promoting until you're 14 years in?
Yeah, that's about right. I worked several patrol assignments. I loved it. Quite frankly, I loved every assignment that I had. Whatever assignment I had at the time, that was like my favorite assignment. There's no bad assignments. They're just bad attitudes. And to me, the glass is always half full. And so now, about 14 years in, I'm back working undercover again and narcotics. And there's a captain that comes up to me and says, hey, the sergeant's test is coming up. I think you need to take the sergeant's test. And I'm thinking, why would I do that? I'm working undercover. I believe, I'm making our city safer. I'm having a great time working undercover. I think I'm doing some great work. And he says, but I've watched you. And he has told me, and he says, but I watch how you take younger officers under your wing and you show them how to, do a surveillance, or you show them how to write a search warrant. You show them how to do community policing and talk with people. And he says, you can have that much more influence if you start to promote. And I gave it a lot of thought, and I decided to take the test, did well in the interview. Next thing you know, I'm a sergeant.
Well, I, for one, am glad you took that first step.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very kind.
And we'll get into that. We'll get into that shortly. I know during your time within law enforcement, you went through the FBI Academy.
I did, yes.
What motivated you to do that, and what did you get out of that experience?
Yeah, you know what? When I was so fast forward many years, I'm now an assistant chief. Gosh, I think that's been 10 years ago, you know, that I went to the academy. It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing, you know, because you're talking about more than 200, 250 of law enforcement professionals throughout the world, not just our country, but throughout the world. And it's all about leadership, and it's all about sharing best practices and that you might be doing, and then learning from others best practices, what others are doing. And I will tell you, I still stay in contact with many of them. And, you know, some have also are retired. Others have been promoted to chief or an assistant chief. And so I stay in routine contact with many of them. And that was, I will tell you, just professionally and personally, such a great experience because we're all dealing with the same things, and we all want to make our small corner of the world, wherever that happens to be, a better place. And how do we do that? And we can best accomplish that by, again, learning from others and sharing what may have worked in our community.
So you got all of that from the academy while you're an assistant chief. And it's while you're an assistant chief that you and I met.
That's correct, yes.
Up to that point, Chief, who had the greatest, name some people who had the greatest influence on you as you were climbing that ladder. What leaders had the most impact on you while you were in that process of becoming chief?
Well, and I'll tell you, it's not just one person. Certainly family always stays, you know, close at heart. I would run things by, you know, a lot of my family, talk about different things. But so many leaders inside our police department at different ranks, and they don't have to necessarily be a rank ahead of me, but to look again at how it's all about how to treat people. You know, we're in a people business, and how people handle different situations. So I will tell you, so many individuals inside the department, outside the department, that, you know, I wouldn't hesitate to pick up the phone, call them. And I will tell you, even now that, even though I'm retired, I still hear from, you know, some individuals across the country and locally that, you know, might say, hey, let me run something by you. And, you know, because I know that you've handled this situation before. And it's all about self-improvement. And, you know, it's all about working together and trying to make everybody better. You know, as they say, a rising tide lifts all boats.
So, Chief, take us through the day that you discover that you're going to be appointed chief by the mayor.
Well, I'll tell you, that was,
what was that day? What was that day like? And tell me about the celebration that you had with your family.
Well, thank you for saying that. You know, I'll always be grateful to Mayor Faulkner for appointing me chief and unanimously confirmed from the city council. And, you know, the mayor, he had just recently been elected, and he had asked me a question. He said, if you ever had the opportunity to be the chief of the San Diego Police Department, what would you do? Just kind of an open-ended question. And I talked him through about some of the things that we would want to accomplish together. Because nobody does anything by themselves, but to accomplish together. And, you know, it was a long, you know, back and forth. And at the end, he said, I'm offering you the position. And
just like that? Just like that?
Yeah.
Just like that?
I said, I enthusiastically accept.
Wow.
But, you know, and I tell people this a lot, is that I didn't know, you know, I didn't know that, you know, this opportunity was going to come forward. You know, I thought that, you know, but you have to be prepared. You know, you never know who's going to ask you a question, you know, and, you know, you as a leader of an organization And there's leadership at every rank. I don't just mean, once you start promoting, it's leadership at every single rank. You should have a good idea about what's going on and how to make things better where you're at. And so I told him how, what the vision would be to move the San Diego Police Department forward and our city forward.
So you become chief, you celebrate with your family, and not only do you become chief, you become the first female chief in the history of the San Diego Police Department. I would imagine that takes on added responsibility since you are a very conscientious person and setting an example for young girls and women that, if you do the right thing and work hard, anything is possible for you. And I just want you to share with our viewers what it was like being the first chief of police outside of the department and the responsibility that you took upon yourself to put yourself out there as the first female chief.
And Sean, it's interesting that you said that, because I knew, being the first, female police chief in the history of our department and by population of a major city, it would be a big deal, or some would think it would be a big deal. But I would tell you is that even I didn't realize how big a deal it was until I started walking around the city in my uniform. But by the way, I did that all the time. I've done that from, I was just a little baby cop, a recruit. I would get out of my car and talk to people. And, but now I'm the chief and walking around with the 4 stars. And I can't even tell you, and this is when it really hit me, how many families with big smiles would come up and approach me with their young daughters. And they would say to their young daughters, honey, this is the chief of police. It goes to show and proves to you that you can be anything that you want in the world. And then I would add, and yes, you can, but you have to be willing to work hard.
Well, Chief, it really means even that much more, because it's within a profession that unfortunately had a history of discrimination as it relates to women joining the police force, people of color being members of law enforcement. And I like to call this era of law enforcement the golden age of law enforcement, because it's never been better than it is now. If you want to become a member of law enforcement, you can. You can be the sergeant, you can be a captain, you can be a commander, you can be the chief. And that wasn't always the case. And so for you to be a living example of things have changed within law enforcement, I think it means a lot.
Oh, it does. And when I first started to go to the major city chiefs conferences and I would look around the room, there weren't many women chiefs. That's the top 60, 68 by population cities in our country. And we meet, regularly. And it's a great organization, just an incredible organization. And there weren't a lot of women chiefs. And I'm proud to say that there are a lot more now. And the opportunities are certainly there. And again, it goes back to the progressiveness of San Diego, that if you can do the job, you get to do the job.
Absolutely. So you preside over a department, the 8th largest city in the country. And by the time you retired, San Diego was the safest city in the country. What major steps do you think you put in place to bring that about?
Well, and I will tell you, nobody accomplishes anything themselves. It's all about we. And so many things, though, because again, it goes back to what we talked about earlier with community policing. Sharing in the responsibility. Public safety is a shared responsibility. So I could not be more proud of the men and women of our police department, sworn, civilian, volunteers. Our professional civilian staff just does an incredible job. The bravery and dedication of our officers, as I talked about, the volunteers, working in collaboration and cooperation with our state, local, federal law enforcement partners. I will tell you, because again, I've spoken with chiefs throughout the country and throughout the world. The relationship that we have here in San Diego is very special. It's about checking your ego at the door. Nobody cares who gets the credit. all we care about is making our community the safest, in our country, and working together, again, very importantly, with our community, all of us, I'll repeat myself, sharing in the responsibility. So it wasn't one thing, it was everything. The philosophy of bring everybody together for that common, goal, because we have to work together, because let's face it, those that are committing crimes and preying upon our good citizens, they don't care where one city ends and the next city begins.
Right.
They don't care if you're the San Diego Police Department or you're a sheriff's officer or your FBI or whoever you happen to be. They're just looking for the next victim. So it's up to us as a community to care about each other, to prevent crime before it happens, and to make sure that individual crimes don't become a series and that crime as a whole don't become commonplace. So it was all of that philosophy, using proactiveness, using technology, using everything that we could, again, working together. And I will tell you, that getting named the safest large city was not by luck or accident, but I have to say this. Yes, we were named the safest large city, and we're very proud of that. But you know what? Crime is not zero. And
Right.
there's still victims out there. And, when I would present the numbers in front of city council and put the numbers of the crime out there, I always paused and reminded our community, reminded everyone, yes, it's great that the number went down, but we still have these numbers that are our mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers and friends and neighbors that are being victimized. And until crime is zero, it's not good enough.
Well, Chief, I know that there's something else that you did while you were chief that was a bit historic. You correct me if I'm wrong, but under your leadership, the San Diego Police Department became the first department in the country to uniformly go to using body-worn cameras.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
What went into that decision, and did you get any blowback from the community at all as you made that decision to make that universal throughout the department?
Well, thanks for asking that. I will tell you that technology, as I said, very important, but the most, especially in the 21st century, but I believe your most important resource is your people, it's your personnel. And a body camera was a way of using technology with our personnel, with our patrol officers. And I viewed it as a win-win. The camera, would back up what the officer was doing, and the great work that they were doing, because I really was confident that the majority of our officers were doing the right thing all the time. But even if a few were doing the wrong thing some of the time, that was a few too many doing the wrong thing at any time. So I viewed it as a win-win, is that it would hold both the community, but our officers accountable to their actions as you're having, these police community relations and talking with our public. And I am proud to say that we were an early adapter and leader in this technology. And the interesting story about this is, I knew we would need a very strong policy. So I'd asked the team that would go ahead and would be the one that would be overseeing this project to see what else was out there. And because we didn't know that we were going to be the first, major department or city to do this, and to see what else was out there and bring me a policy, because maybe we could take a look at it and modify it. And they came back a little later and said, Chief, there's nothing out there. We are going to be the first major department, first major city to do it. A few smaller departments have done it, but we'll be the first major one. Are you sure you want to take this on? You're going to take every hit. And I said, absolutely. That's what leaders do. Of course, we're going to do this. And we brought together all kinds of stakeholders. And in the end, our first policy, and it's been modified several times now, but our first policy, Sean, had a 95% agreement. And you can't get a 95% agreement with your best friend on where you're going to dinner tonight. And we did it with a body camera policy. And to your point, when you asked about, was there some kind of pushback? Yeah, some officers definitely pushed back. And I will tell you, our biggest critics became our biggest advocates later on when they saw the value of the technology. And they, later said that some that said they didn't want it later said, you know what, Chief, I won't go out on patrol now without my camera.
Right.
And, it's like any new thing, there's going to be, there's going to be some trepidation, understood. We have some growing pains, understood. And, but, it makes us feel great. To this day, I still get contacted by law enforcement leaders across the world saying, how did you do this? And I would take them through that. You got to bring people in. Again, that 5%, we had a 95% agreement. That 5%, we were not going to agree, but I wasn't going to let it derail moving forward.
Well, listen, I'm living proof of how progressive and open-minded the San Diego Police Department is and has been, especially when you were the chief, because I came to you with an idea.
Right.
I came to you with an idea of how we could utilize sports to mitigate some of the unnecessary violence and ill feelings between law enforcement and some members of the community. And I'm going to let you tell that story.
Yeah, I love this story. As we talk about, get out of your car and talk to people. And, Father Henry, may you rest in peace. I know he meant a lot to you. He meant a lot to me. And we were at the St. Jude's Church for Father Henry was being recognized and given an award. And I remember you were sitting at a table by yourself. Here I am in uniform as an assistant chief, and I walk up. There was open seating, and I asked if I could sit down next to you, and you said yes. And we start talking, and the next thing we know, we have Ohio State, and together. And I love and passion for Buckeye sports. I give you my cell phone number, you give me yours, and I say, let's keep in touch. And years later, you come to me, and it was after Ferguson, the incident in Ferguson, and you said, I want to hit you up with this idea called Game Changers, about using sports to bridge the gap between police and the community. And you didn't have to say another word. When you said sports, police, community, I was 100% all in.
Well, it's interesting because I did a lot of vetting before I came to you with that white paper. And I spoke to Father Henry about it, and he said, look, the Shelley Zimmerman I know, he said, she's going to be for this. And really before, as I recall, before our lunch arrived, we went to the Yard House to have lunch.
Right.
You said, let's do it. And, our first event was at San Diego State, appropriately so. And the rest is history. 80 events later, over 1,000 participants have come through the program. The program is accredited by California Post.
Right.
And it would not have happened if I hadn't met you when you were an assistant inside a department that had a history of doing things outside of the box, and you being an individual that walked the walk and the talk as it relates to, it's going to take it's a shared responsibility, and law enforcement and the general public have to work together to bring about that status of San Diego being the safest large city in the country. So I want to thank you for being open-minded, listening to me, a little bit of luck involved. The Ohio State University really is what was the glue that kept us together. And I remember where I was, the phone rang and it was you. And I'm on the 8 freeway driving east, going back home, when you told me, I'm chief now. I didn't know that you had been promoted. And that was long before Game Changer was ever spawned, but we've had that relationship on a personal level. And I think that had everything to do with Game Changer being born. So I want to thank you for that.
Yeah, and I want to thank you also, Sean, for bringing it and having this idea. And, I'll just go back to sports. If you think about it, it really breaks down all barriers. So, when it's, who do you see when you go to a sporting event? You see black,
everybody,
white,
everybody,
Hispanic, Asian, young, old. I mean, you see everybody there. And when your favorite team hits that walk-off home run or throws that touchdown pass, you're hugging each other. You don't care who that other person is. You're in the love of that moment. And so capture that moment and continue to move forward. And that was what Game Changers, when you came to me, that's the way I envisioned it, is that, you know, to quote Martin Luther King, it's hard to hate up close. And so when you're talking with somebody, you don't always have to agree, but you have, you know, to have that mutual respect about where each other is coming from. And it's not enough just to hear the person. You have to listen to the person and understand where they're coming from.
And the only way you can do that is to spend time with one another on a regular basis. And so I want to thank you for that, Chief. Our time is waning. And so I know that you are in retirement now. You put your 35 years in, you paid your dues. San Diego is forever grateful for your service. How are you spending your time now? I know that you're teaching. I know that you remain involved in a number of community organizations. Talk to us how you are still serving the community while in retirement.
Oh, well, thanks, Sean. Yeah, I try to keep it to about 40 hours a week now, and a lot of people laugh and say that's a full-time job, but, you know, as chief, it's an 80 to 90-hour work week. You know, I would tell you, you know, I was very proud to be a chancellor appointee on public safety and leadership to National University. And, you know, it's been phenomenal. I get opportunities to teach classes there or to guest lecture. I had a student recently send me an email that said, on a class that I taught, that said, you know, this class was the most work that I've ever done in a class, but it's been my favorite class because it was eye-opening in the conversations that we had. And they said, boy, you just keep it real. You know, you just tell it like it is. I'm also on several boards. I'm on the One San Diego board, very proud of that, you know, which helps all communities to be at their best. Padres Pedal for a Cause, you know, to raise money for cancer research. All the money stays right here in San Diego. I'm on, this won't surprise you either, I'm on the Holiday Bowl committee, you know, football game that we bring in, the Holiday Bowl every year. I'm on the U.S. Attorney Safe Streets Initiative. I'm on the Ohio State University Sociology Advisory Board, and I'm a huge supporter of the Challenge Athletes Foundation. And I've rode my bicycle, you know, several times now from San Francisco to San Diego to support and raise money for our challenged athletes to, you know, for adaptive sports equipment, get them back in the game of life through sports. So that's what I've been doing.
Well, and you brought something up that we didn't touch upon. You are an avid cyclist, and I know that while you were chief, so is Mayor Faulkner, correct?
He is, yes.
So how many of these cycling events have you done to raise money?
Gosh, many, many. I don't keep track of the numbers, but you know, and again, it's all about giving back. I'm the luckiest person in the world, the absolute luckiest person in the world. I don't run as much as I did before. You know, I'm in my 60s now, so you know, you wake up.
You look great, Chief. You look great.
Thank you, thank you. See, that's why, Sean, we get along so well. Another reason.
Because I'm honest. Because I'm honest.
Thank you. But you know, so you know, things kind of creak a little bit now. You know that I'm in my 60s, so you know, swimming and cycling are not so hard on your joints, right. And you know, I really spend more time on the bicycle. And I'll tell you too, it's so social. I mean, it's wonderful, and that's been something that I'm really missing right now because you're not riding in the pelotons because of, you know, COVID-19. Right. You know, you're not, but I'm still getting out on my bicycle, still raising money for good causes. They just had the Bike for Humanity, Bill Walton. I was just on my bike helping to raise money for that last week. We got the Padres Pedal coming up, the World Without Cancer Day, I believe on June 20th. I'll be on my bicycle again. And again, you know, for the raising money for the Challenge Athletes Foundation. There's so many great causes out there, you know, and I just ask people to, you know, to find your passion, whatever that happens to be, and to give back, because we're in this together, yes. All of us. And it takes all of us, again, sharing the responsibility to help others. And that's what it's all about. I feel better about myself when I can help somebody else.
That's beautiful, Chief, that you continue to give back even in retirement. Now, I did a little bit of sleuthing, and so this next question has to do with, how did you become a Batman expert? What is that about?
Well, this was it goes back to relationships, and we're all connected. So my older brother in New York, lived near Paul Levitz, who was I believe, like the CEO of we talk about like Comic-Con and all the different comic books. Right. And so I started, going to Comic-Con years ago just to start talking to Paul Levitz. And we would walk around Comic-Con. This guy, Paul Levitz, you talk about DC Comics and everything else. Right. I mean, this guy is a legend, and he's swarmed with people, and I'm just like, oh my gosh. So we would just start talking, and this went on again for years. Every time he would come to San Diego, I'd get together with him. I'd watch him at his panels, and he would ask me a lot of questions about police work and when I worked undercover. And I noticed that he was writing things down, and I'm like, Paul, what are you doing? He says, to you, they're your stories. To me, it's material. And so wow. That's great, wonderful. So a couple of years ago, he's going to do, what was it, the 80th anniversary of Batman. And he was going to put together this book. And he asked if I would contribute and write an excerpt for this amazing book about Batman, about what Batman meant to me. And I could have used any of the Batmans, but I chose the one back in the 1960s when we were kids, and my two brothers and my sister and I, we would fashion capes out of small blankets and, the Kleenex boxes that would be our mask, and we'd run around, our living room and act like we were saving, the world. And so I wrote a little story about that, and I didn't know if it would be accepted or not. Or if they thought it would be corny, but next thing I know, I get, a call from Paul and DC Comics that says, you made the book. So I thought, wow, that was pretty great.
Well, I did not know that about you, and I wanted to make sure that I snuck that question in because I wanted to hear about it. And Chief, I can't thank you enough for spending time with us today, Community Quarantine, and talking about your journey from Ohio to San Diego and how you've been such a jewel to the San Diego community and the policing community in a broad sense. I can't thank you enough.
And right back at you, Sean. We've been friends now for a long time, and fingers crossed that there'll be a football season, the Buckeyes. And too bad we didn't make it to the national championship game last year, but we'll see what happens this year with the season. But, I just want to say to everybody, please be healthy, please be safe. And, when you do something for somebody else, you feel that much better about yourself.
Thanks again, Chief. I'll talk to you after this.
Okay. Thanks, Sean. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Thanks for joining us at Community Quarantine, everyone. And we'll be back tomorrow. I'll be interviewing Loyola Marymount University Athletic Director Craig Pittens. So join us then. Thanks again.